Hey folks, in this interview, I'm sitting down with Mr. Levi Sim. We're going to be talking all about the concept of personal projects. This is TWiP. All right, so the idea of personal projects isn't a new one, right? I mean, photojournalists, for example, have been doing sort of the idea of a group of photos to illustrate a story or an idea since the beginning of photography, or probably even before that. But we've seen kind of a dearth in that over the past couple of years, I guess, in kind of the rise of single photos that don't necessarily stand on their own. Some people, however, like my guest, Levi Sim, is doing this stuff and doing the personal project. And Levi, you've been doing, first of all, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. This is a real pleasure.
No, it is
a real honor.
You know, and I gotta compliment you on your color scheme there. Yeah, let me bring you full screen here. So you are the only guest that has gone completely patriotic, and I don't want to give the listening audience any hints, but that is a blue screen that can be keyed out in video editing software.
It is a perfect chroma key screen back there. Yes, it could be.
So if you're listening to the audio version of this, head over to YouTube and watch the video. And if you know how to download a YouTube video, you could I don't know. I'm just saying you could do some stuff. All right, man. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. In all seriousness, I've known you. I feel like I've known you forever, but this is the first time I've had you on my show for some reason. So thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's seriously an honor. You know, for me, every time I hear your voice, it takes me back to my first year in photography, listening to TWiP, walk into my studio, listening to you talk with Nicolesy and Derek Story and the whole gang.
Wow.
And it just, you know, like when you hear that thing, it transports. So I transport back to Logan, Utah, where I had my first studio and got started in photography. So
well, thanks you.
Thanks for all the help.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening. And now I feel really, really old. Thank you.
Well, I mean, yeah.
When I first started walking, Frederick, I was listening to your podcast.
Well, I mean,
and now I have a full beard.
Well, and I should say that I didn't go to school for photography. This is my my 42nd job.
Yeah. So hey, join the club. Man. Join the club.
Yeah.
Enjoy the club.
I've had plenty of experiences before now.
I love it. Well, you know what? Just to jump into this, part of the impetus of this interview was you've been working on, and we'll find out, I guess, shortly. You've been working on a personal project for a while, and many people may know about it. It's the shot, kind of the Steve Jobsian black and white shot.
That's it, yeah.
Right, with the hand on the chin, and yep. You know, first describe that project and then how you started it.
Sure. Well, so it's that I call it the Steve Jobs portrait project, and it's basically imitating the portrait of Steve Jobs that he gave to Albert Watson for the cover of Time magazine, and you know, you think as a photographer, you think, well, that's a collaboration between the photographer and the subject quite a lot. Mm-hmm. I haven't talked to Watson myself. I'd really like to, but as I understand it, and I've seen pictures of Steve Jobs in the past doing the same pose.
Nice.
And so I think it's pretty characteristic of Steve himself, but it's definitely imitating the portrait that Albert Watson made of Steve Jobs.
That's fantastic.
And yeah, well, and so it started the day that Steve passed away on, wow. I think it was October 5th, 2011.
Yeah, I remember that day. I was on a plane. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. I totally remember it too, because it was a Wednesday. And on Wednesdays, back there in Logan, Utah, my photo club got together. They still get together. I think they moved it to Thursdays. But they get together at lunchtime and have a brown bag lunch and come over and talk some photography stuff. We'd pull up Scott Kelby's blog and talk about the guest blogger that day, mm-hmm. and have lunch and then launch and share pictures and whatever. And so that day we talked for about 10 seconds about Scott Kelby's blogger, yeah. Which was too bad because it was a really important one.
Yeah.
But then we moved on to Steve Jobs passing away and all these things. And I was not a fanboy of Apple. Mm-hmm. I was pretty new in my Apple career. I think I bought my first Apple stuff was in 2000, and this was just 2011. And so I had computers, and I had recently gotten a phone, and I liked it.
Yeah.
But I had no idea. Actually, I got an iPad the first week they came out as well. So maybe I am a fanboy. I don't know.
They got you, man. They sucked you in. You got sucked in.
I'm talking to you on my 10th Mac now in fewer than 10 years as well. And it's not because they broke. It's just because.
Yeah, because you're
I could. Yeah.
you're marinating in the Kool-Aid now.
Exactly.
Well, that's cool.
Hence the red shirt. No, so after they left, my assistant and I went up the stairs into the studio and started messing around trying to make the same kind of picture. So my buddy Justin has the first one in the project, and then I'm the second one in the project because he went over and pushed the button for me. And then I put a note on Facebook and I said, if anyone would like to come down to the studio today and make a Steve Jobs style portrait, come on down. And over the next week, 100 people came to do it.
Wow.
And
so how many are you up to now right now? Like
nearly 2,000.
What? 2,000?
Yeah.
Levi, I was thinking, yeah, he's probably, I don't know, maybe up to 300, 200, something like that. Really?
No, yeah. Yeah, pushing 2,000 right now.
Wow, so. Congratulations, man. Jeez.
Thanks. It's been a ton of fun. Yeah.
Is there an end to this, or is this just a perpetual portrait project?
It's perpetual. Yeah, it's a perpetual portrait project. And I don't, like, it's something that I keep doing, but I don't feel that I own it. I'm imitating somebody else's photograph, and I'm imitating a guy who did it throughout his lifetime.
Sure.
So I don't feel like it's just mine, and I would encourage anybody else to do it as well, because
it's like an homage, right?
It can be, and some people are like, who? Steve who?
Really?
I'm like, it's just some guy, but do this. It'll be fun.
Oh, man. Who says Steve who? I want to know these people.
Right. Well, and it amazed me because Logan, Utah is not a metropolis. Yeah. There's a university there, but it's a cow town. I mean, like, one of the major suppliers of beef in the Western United States is right there. And
wow.
it is extremely rural. And to have that many people come and do it was pretty cool. And initially, when Steve passed away, it said Steve Jobs, 1954 to 2011 under his name.
Yeah.
And so for like those first 100, I did that. I put everybody's name and their birth year with it.
Oh, okay.
In Helvetica font, and it was pretty cool. That became way too much work. Really quickly.
Yeah. I would think that maybe like Apple would have reached out to you and done some sort of gallery showing in the new spaceship that they've erected or something. Has any of that happened?
That would be kind of like a dream thing to have happen, I suppose.
Right. I can see it happening. I mean, it's an impressive body of work. At 3,000, that's an entire wall.
3K is the thing, right?
Yeah, that's an entire wall, depending on how big you print them, or 2,000, sorry. Yeah, and depending on how big you print them, and it's kind of an homage to all the lives that Steve Jobs touched, right?
Right, it is, and most of them, honestly, are photographers, because I set this up at conferences, and have a lot of people walking by to do it, and so that's the basics of it. Well, and then
crazy. That is really.
And
cool.
So I did this, and then it must have been June or July of 2012. I was at a conference at Skip Cohen University, a little conference, and Scott Bourne was there, and I was showing somebody else all these pictures on my iPad, and Scott walked by and goes, "Hey, you ought to write that up for Photo Focus." I said, "Okay," and so that was my first post on Photo Focus, where I'm now an editor, and then Scott said, "You ought to keep doing that."
Yeah.
And he said he even offered, if Scott Bourne says something to you, I strongly recommend doing it.
Yeah. He knows a little bit about photography, I hear, right?
He knows a little bit about photography and marketing and hype and stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And branding. Yeah. And he says, I've known some other photographers with really good projects similar to this who aren't doing it now. And you won't even know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott's one of those people that you meet them and you intrinsically kind of know that they probably have forgotten more about photography and marketing than you would know in your lifetime. Right. So, they drop a pearl of knowledge. You probably want to pick it up and run with it. Right?
Absolutely. Well, and there's so many people like that in this industry too. And man, I feel lucky to have hobnobbed with a lot of them and even call many of them friends now. I love it.
That's fantastic. Well, Levi, let's segue into the idea of projects themselves, right? And, you and I, before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about the state of the union, not that we are some sages in terms of like, keeping track of what everyone's doing, but
that's why I grew a beard. So people would like believe that
instant
I was
credibility, facial hair, and then the hat just tops it all off, right? And then the bow tie. I mean, come on. Right. How can you not know what you're talking about with a bow tie?
Yeah. I might have to lose the beard. Like 3 things might be too many. I don't know.
And the red shirt. I mean, come on.
And the red shirt. The red shirt's pretty standard now too. Yeah.
That's awesome. But like we were talking about the idea of how personal projects, there seems to be, and maybe Scott noticed this too, there seems to be a dearth of personal projects. Maybe it's a side effect or a cause of social media where people are shooting pretty photos that are competent and well exposed, and they look good, but they don't really tell a story, and they're not part of a greater group. It's like you and I were talking about, like the long exposure black and white shot of the dock with the water blurred in the foreground that everyone has to do, which is nothing wrong with that. But
no, I'd love to do it. Yeah, like I'm looking for a doc to do that myself.
Yeah, San Francisco, ton of them.
Exactly.
Right here. But how do you? I guess to put a fine point on the question, is it important to do personal projects and to give yourself personal projects as a let's and even put it a finer point on it, as a beginner, as someone who's just learning how to do photography? Should they be looking at their photography as collections of shots of things, or should they just be out, hey, I feel like shooting a model today, I'm going to go shoot a model, tomorrow I'm going to go shoot the Golden Gate Bridge? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely important. People right now do a lot of 365 projects, which I have mixed feelings about. Like it's good to get out and shoot every day. But I don't know, they're not focused, and it's like if I wanted to become better at sports, and so for the next year, I'm going to play a different sport every day.
Oh, right.
And sometimes I'll play mini golf 2 days in a row because I couldn't quite get out to the field. And that's kind of what happens here, right? We get a lot of different things from folks on these 365 projects, and nothing. Usually, you'll probably get inundated with examples of awesome projects, which there are.
Right. Well, if they restrict themselves to a single genre, right?
Exactly. So it becomes a real project and not just a vomitous mass of,
my alarm went off and I need to take a photo. My kid is playing with their blocks. Let me get a shot of that. Or
there's some interesting light on my desk.
Here's a blur of the traffic passing by. Yeah.
How many coffee mugs are on there?
Right.
And so I think having a focused subject matter and like doing the same, like if I wanted to become better at soccer and I played soccer every day, I would become much better at soccer, and I would become skilled at all manner of things involving soccer. It's that 10,000 hours thing where you have to do the same thing for 10,000 hours, not playing the violin and the piano and the guitar for about 2,000 hours each. So you've got 10,000 hours of musician time. You're still not a master in each of those things. So, and I've learned so much doing the Steve Jobs project because, well, I don't know.
Like what kind
I can give you a list of the things I've learned.
Yeah, give me the top few. I mean, would it be like you're interacting with people and learning how to break the ice? That would be my guess.
Like the most important thing that I've learned, and I think everybody should do this. Somehow, I had the idea within my first 2 months of owning a DSLR and making portraits for people that I went to the gardener's market and I set up a booth at the gardener's market. Cost me $20 for the day, and I made free portraits all day long, and they were not very good looking back at them.
Yeah.
But it was fun, and I practiced. I photographed like 52 kids that day.
Wow.
And so that gave me a lot of practice, and I had some fun doing it, and it was no negatives.
Yeah.
I wasn't practicing on my clients. That's really important. And then in 2020, 2012, 2011, one of those two, I had the opportunity to set up a booth at the Home and Garden Show at the, they rented out the university gymnasium, and there's all these people with booths in there and landscaping and tiles and shower remodeling people and me. And I invited people in to make a portrait, and I had my camera tethered to a laptop plugged into a large television. And as the pictures came into the laptop, Lightroom ran a black and white preset on them, and they ended up right there on screen right before people. It must have been 2011 because Steve Jobs was nowhere in my mind. So it was well before that. It was just black and white portraits on a black background and done off the cuff, and it was a ton of fun. And I photographed 1,500 people in 2 days.
Wow.
And there is nothing better for your photography than shooting a lot.
Yeah. No.
Right?
Yeah. It's repetition, right? It's repetition and building up the muscles in your shutter finger.
Just working that thing out.
Yeah.
And more than that, working out my mind so that when I see this person, I can be like, okay, the last 2 times I photographed a person who looked like this person, I did this and it was bad. Let me try something different on this guy. Yeah. Oh, that worked well. And last time I said this and it kind of made somebody feel uncomfortable. So let me try saying this time.
That's right. Yeah.
And so just everything about interacting with people, I've done it thousands of times now, and it's made me such a better portraitist in every aspect of my work. I can take any child who comes into my field of view and get them laughing and giggling in less than 5 minutes. And I can get executives a great looking headshot in less than 5 minutes. And it's largely because I've just done this over and over and over again. Yeah. And then there's the light. Like, it seems like I'm setting up the same thing every time, but every time it's totally different. One night I'm at a nightclub in Vegas and people can't hear me, and I have to describe how to talk to them. And I've got my white backdrop propped up on a planter with a light clamped to the post in the building. Another time we're outdoors and I've got to make things work for that. And so setting up the same light in a myriad of different circumstances is also extremely powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's the trifecta, right? I would imagine, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine shooting that much in that short amount of time, you get really intimate with your gear, with the lenses, with the light, and how everything works together. And like you're saying, the psychology of interacting with people and what works and what doesn't work. And I would imagine at the end of that, you're pretty seasoned, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just over and over again. And all of those pieces come together, and now I can do it really quickly, and I can do it efficiently, and I can wrangle in people who don't want to be in a photograph. And amazingly, that kind of skill has gotten me my highest paying clients as well. I go to the sales meeting for a company, and all of their top salespeople are at this meeting from around the world, and they hire me to come and make headshots of them right there as well. And so I've got fewer than 7 minutes with each person, and I've got to make a great looking photograph, and they pay me a lot of money to do it. And I really enjoy that.
And you're like, 7 minutes? That's a luxury.
I know.
Are you kidding me? I could do this in one.
Exactly. No, I kind of buffer it. Like, I'm like, if I could have up to 7 minutes with everybody, and they're seriously done usually in fewer than 3 minutes.
Wow.
There's a couple of people who take the full 7, and there's a couple of people who are late. So I need the 7 minutes in there.
Yeah.
But
the universe balances everything out for you, right?
Exactly. We can make a great looking headshot of just about anybody really quickly.
Well, Levi, I want to transition a little bit. So projects are one thing, right? So like your Steve Jobsian project, that's kind of an ongoing thing. It's similar, people know that when you take another one, it's another addition to that ongoing never-ending project, right? So, but what about stories? And what about telling stories with photography and using a story, or, if it's a story, or maybe it's something political that you want to illustrate and draw attention to, a la photojournalism. What do you think about that kind of stuff? Should photographers be doing that?
Absolutely. I mean, photography has always been such a powerful medium for showing situations and bad stuff and bringing it to light. I'm not that kind of photographer usually.
Yeah.
I don't have an outlet for it. I don't have the drive to go into those situations.
Right. Right.
However, that's one thing that people can do and make a strong impact. We'll talk about the danger of one of those in a minute, but the doing it as a what's it called? A trite thing, a trope.
Yeah, a trope. Yeah.
Like there's tropes in that, and we want to stay away from those. But for me, if I was in this to make pictures for myself, I wouldn't have done 2,000 of these. I wouldn't have done 200 of these.
Yeah.
Because it's too self-centered, and it's too. If I go into this focused on adding to my project, then nobody wants to be in a photograph with me. Mm-hmm. Like that's not my point. When I'm making a picture with you, the point isn't that I'm creating something else to add to my project. How selfish of me,
right.
if that's the thing.
Yeah.
And
you're like, you're coal. I'm a steam engine, and you're just the coal I need to shovel into the fire.
Yeah. And if it's not you, it's going to be the next one. So move along.
Right. Right.
And you got to move quick because I need these next people to come in here.
Exactly.
And actually with the Steve Jobs pictures, they're usually 30 seconds or less, and there's a line of people up at the convention to come through. Wow. So it's really quick.
Yeah, yeah. But I remember seeing you do one of those in New York.
Right. Yeah. And so the thing is that I've got to the thing that's important to me is not the picture that we're making together, but the experience that we're making together.
Yeah.
And from my side, I get to talk about how I met this guy on the street, and it turns out he was headed to his daughter's baseball game in a few minutes, but he was just hanging out at the coffee shop where I was shooting these portraits as a fundraiser for the school's foundation. Mm-hmm. And I talked with him for a while, and he thought it was cool, and he agreed to be in the picture with me, and he's one of my favorites.
Wow.
And he had not planned to be there and do it either. And on his side, he gets to say, this wacko in a bow tie and a hat was hanging out at the coffee shop today, and he made this picture of me, and check it out. I bought a print from him. Yeah. And it's a fundraiser for the. I think it was the coolest thing.
And people would probably say, wait a minute, a photographer, bow tie, hat? You've been Levi'd.
In that town,
that was a Sim sighting.
Exactly. In Lake Oswego, Oregon, they would say, "Oh yeah, no, that was Levi. Yeah, we've done that too." Yeah. But we made a memory of a thing together, and the memory of making this picture is what we made together. But we each take home a story about it.
Sure.
And that story is so much better than the photograph. And I could tell that story without even showing you the photograph. And he can tell the story without showing the photograph and enjoy the experience all over again.
Yeah.
And I think that is just good. Like it's good for everybody involved.
Yeah.
And it makes me have a more rich life. It makes that guy have a richer life. I met this guy at the gas station the other day in Garden Valley, Idaho, which has a gas station. That's about it.
That's downtown.
That's downtown. It's about the only place you can buy something. There's like a school and a car repair shop too.
Wow.
And I met this guy at the gas station. I was having a Subway lunch, and he came over and started talking to me. So I talked with him, and this other kid walked by, and he started talking with us, asking where he could find some mushrooms. It was kind of weird. And then,
wow. Okay.
and so it was this fun experience. And then I said, you know, Sandy, you're standing in this great light. And he's got this big beard and this white hair that's combed, and it just looks like one of those guys you want to make a portrait of.
Yeah.
And if I start sitting there saying, why don't you let me take a picture of you? I'm going to take a picture of you. You look, I want to take this picture. It's disingenuous, and it's selfish again.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously when I first saw him, I was like, man, that's a guy I'd like to photograph.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
But a half hour later, after we've been talking about how he grew up here in the Valley and things, now when I ask him to let me make a portrait of him, it's not just a total stranger.
Yeah,
now I've been talking with.
You've built up rapport, and now you can have a normal conversation. It's like it's almost like micro dating, right? You can't.
Yeah.
You go into a bar, you meet someone, you're like, "Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Let's go." You
Right.
Probably want to have a conversation or two first before you dive into it. But Levi, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh well, so I made a portrait of him, And then I spent the next 4 hours with him, and we drove out to his farm, and I helped him move some farm equipment. And then the next time I was passing through, I gave him a ring, and he took me up on this mountain that's this highly coveted spot to go see that no one's allowed to go see because it's all private property. Yeah. And he showed me around up there, and so I've made this friend because I had a conversation and we made some things together. Yeah. And we continue making experience together. So I think that's cool.
Yeah. The camera, I mean, that's a whole different conversation, but the camera for a lot of people is the passport to meeting new and interesting people and to getting into new and interesting situations where if you were sans camera, you're just another tourist or another person. They're like, oh, you know, so
exactly.
And it gives you, even for you, it gives you or for the photographer, it gives the photographer an excuse to start a conversation. Whereas with the guy at the gas station, had photography not been involved at all, you may have still started a conversation, but it's easier if there's a basis for it and a quote reason why, right?
Right. And people already know that you're a little bit out of your mind because you spent $6,000 on this thing hanging around your neck, and they're like, well, I already know that guy's a lunatic, so I'm not surprised by whatever he says.
You have no idea what else I have in the trunk. Yeah.
Exactly, right. So it's an automatic icebreaker, and people who are not normally outgoing can become more outgoing using their camera. I am like the most effulgent, gregarious guy I know. You know, I'm effervescent even, and talking to people. Yeah. Unless I'm not. Yeah. Like nobody is naturally outgoing. Right. You're outgoing if you want to be today. Yeah. And that's true. And you can put it on, and you can practice doing it. Yeah. And I recommend you do.
It's just like that shutter button, right? You can practice it, and the more times you do it, the more times you interact with people, the more you realize that wow, everybody's generally the same, and you know, no one's scary, you know, and people are generally nice. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. So I have a question for you. So you mentioned early on that you consider yourself a portraitist. Mm-hmm. Why do you consider yourself a portraitist, and what does that mean to you?
One thing is that I make a living photographing people. Mm-hmm. So that's one part of it. I love all kinds of photography. I was photographing birds and coyotes yesterday. Mm-hmm. I love doing it, and I love practicing it. And I love photographing buildings and sunsets and stuff too. Yeah. But along the same lines, they just don't matter. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Scott Bourne can make you cry about the birds he photographs and fall in love with them and things. But in 100 years, overall, it doesn't matter what that mountain looks like right now. Right. It can be interesting and factual, but anytime you make any kind of photograph of a person, there are people already interested in that. There's that person's ancestors who are interested in it. There's that person's progeny who are interested in it. There's friends. Yeah. And you've done something that automatically has value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. And in fact, I wouldn't purport to call myself a portraitist because I don't have that muscle built up as much as you do. But if I was to pick a genre, it would be that genre. And I would use exactly almost verbatim the words that you use to describe why. And that's, and I'll use it, versus say shooting landscapes. Mm-hmm. If you shoot a landscape, it's going to be there in 100 years, probably, and
something's going to be there. Yeah.
It's not going to be as appreciative of the work. Not that you're doing it for appreciation, but it's not going to impact as many lives. Right. Even Ansel Adams' work was fantastic. Arguably, one of the best landscape photographers out there. A photograph of El Capitan in Yosemite versus a photograph of an elderly lady. Right. The elderly lady, like you said, the progeny and the ancestors and everybody else is going to care about and want a copy of that photo. Yet another photo of Half Dome or El Capitan, maybe not so much, I
mean, like Ansel Adams broke the ground on a lot of that stuff. Yeah. But my desktop screensaver kind of looks better than any of the pictures he made. Yeah. The one that came with my Mac.
Right. And yeah, exactly.
And it has value to me when I make that picture, and it has value to my kids because they were with me, and they're like, "Yeah, I remember that day, and I remember that we always went there." Mm-hmm. But the real value of that landscape photo doesn't necessarily extend beyond that. And I absolutely don't mean to to downplay the value of other stuff, but no, I do. Like, people pictures are more important than any other picture anybody could make. Send your hate mail to Frederick Van Johnson at frederickvanjohnson.com.
There you go. Yeah, send it on. Send it on. I'll create that forward right after this to your email.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, I wanted to end this with just some actionable ideas that you can give photographers that are watching this on if they're like, you know, the light bulb's gone off, it's above the head, and they're like, yeah, of course, I want to start incorporating either ongoing series like Levi's doing, or personal projects that are story based. What advice would you give them? I know go to photofocus.com, but you know. Yeah,
sure. Go to photofocus.com. We've got a lot of things to share there.
Of course.
No, I would say find something that you like. Maybe something that you don't like. Maybe something that interests you is the most important thing. I listened to a podcast the other day from Malcolm Gladwell, and it was something about anything, like the only thing that's worth anything is something interesting. Is basically what it comes down to. Yeah. And so something that interests you is extremely important, because you're not going to keep doing it otherwise. Right. And it, like we've been talking about, people pictures. People pictures are awesome. You don't have to do people pictures for your project. Irving Penn, you know, cabbage leaves and peppers. Yeah. We have this in his mind because he photographed this stuff. And anything that allows you to be engaged with your subject and refine your techniques is awesome. And you could do bell peppers and window light, you know, at every day, and that would be great. You don't have to do it every day, but you the important thing is that you can continue doing it. Yeah. You don't do your 365 and then that's it. Your 365 becomes a decade project. Yeah. And you know,
well, how do you know that? How do you, and the whole thing is subjective, right? So there's no right and there's no wrong or whatever. But how do you know if you're doing, say, like the Steve Jobs type project that you're doing that could be ongoing? How do you know when to stop? And do you stop?
Yeah, well, so if you're known for a thing, you don't stop. Like what if Don Komarechka decided that he'd photographed enough snowflakes? Right. Right. Yeah. Like, pretty soon he wouldn't be known for snowflakes anymore. And even though he's photographed millions of them and has this marvelous book, well, that was 10 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. And wasn't there some guy 10 years ago who used to do snowflakes? Yeah. And it just wouldn't. You've got to.
It becomes part of you, but it does. But it doesn't necessarily have to define you, though, like that, right?
It doesn't have to define you.
It's not like you have to have one thing. Like, you're not divine. Like, I know that project that you're doing because you've done so many of them, and you know it's become in some ways synonymous with Levi Sim, right? But it has. You do a million other things too. It doesn't necessarily have to be just that one thing, right?
Absolutely, but it can introduce you. Yeah. And that's very important. I've talked to other photographers who had incredible personal projects going, and they stopped doing them, and because they felt somehow trapped by it. And it's totally just a mindset. Being trapped by something is just the mindset. It's not the only thing. If you feel like it's the only thing that defines you, then you got to do more stuff. Yeah. But it's okay if it's the thing that introduces you. And for whatever purpose that is, you know, I get hired because people see this and they see this work and they're like, man, it'd be fun to do that. And they do it with me. And then they tell their marketing person that this guy would be fun to have do our pictures. Sure. And that gets me work. So that's one reason I like to do it. But I also just like making pictures with people. And like I said, if I was worried about getting hired by your marketing team, it would ruin the project for me. It would ruin that instance of making a picture. Yeah. So it doesn't have to define you, but it's absolutely okay to introduce you. There's a rule about hats. Never wear a hat with more character than you. And never wear a hat that says hello before you do.
Oh, awesome. I love that. I love that. So that could apply to a lot of stuff. But
right. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. But being known as a guy who wears the hat is just fine. Like, I'm known as a guy in a hat and a bow tie. And I love that. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. That has nothing to do with anything else about me except how to identify me in a crowd. And I think that's one thing that the personal project is good for.
That is so it's iconic. Yeah.
Yeah.
You create your own icon.
Right. If this was the only thing about me, man, would I be a flat human and not like, it would get me on a talk show one time. It would get me on TWiP one time.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't carry me through life at all. No. So I don't know. Is that advice for people?
That's fantastic. So I wanted to end this with your thoughts on, so we've been talking about personal projects and stories and that sort of thing. I want to get your thoughts on social responsibility as it applies to this stuff, because we've been talking about, like even landscape photography. Maybe there's some social responsibility in there if you're documenting, erosion or global warming or whatever, something like that. But from the standpoint of cultural issues and current events that are affecting the world, should photographers, from your perspective, be using their superpowers to go out and shine light on different things that are more impactful to society and telling those stories? Or is that too heavy? Should they stick to, things that are more fun and lighthearted?
That's a hard line, because like if I did that, if I went out and did it, I would be afraid for myself personally.
Yeah.
I'm afraid for myself personally right now that if I went and pursued the hard things, that I would be publishing those photographs in order to aggrandize myself. Mm-hmm. And that is not the right use of your superpowers.
Using the pain of others for self-enrichment.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And you'll forgive me, but I see people do these white guy photo projects where on the weekends I come in from the burbs and I go downtown and I photograph the downtrodden and people shooting up under the bridge. Yeah. And I'm like, look at these things. And it was so hard for them. And I bought them dinner. Mm-hmm. and I published these pictures and, did it do anything actually good?
Yeah. We call them, you call those seagulls, right? Those are
right. Exactly. Right.
But in all fairness, there are white guys under those bridges too.
Well, you're right. No, it's just, yeah. But coming down from my perch amidst the people and, being the prince and the pauper for a day, doesn't make me a helpful person,
Right. I'm torn on that though. I ask you that from a selfish standpoint, because I'm totally torn on that. Like, do you use all this great gear that you have access to and the platform that you have access to shine light? As it's a superpower, right? Not everyone has great cameras and a giant following and a podcast and all this stuff in order to tell stories like this. So is it speaking personally, is it my social responsibility to start documenting and telling stories like that? Or is my personal responsibility to teach and tell people how to do stuff? Or, so those are things I'm struggling with. I don't know. I ask other photographers that a lot to suss out what they think.
Well, like Scott Bourne uses his pictures and absolutely makes a commercial living, makes a living selling pictures commercially to be used of like birds and eagles and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he makes a good living doing that. But he also, when he speaks about birds and when he writes about birds and things, you feel like you want to go and help conserve and do whatever it takes to preserve and improve that bird's ability and birds at large, not necessarily a single bird. And I feel like I do that with my pictures, but on an individual basis. Mm-hmm. When I, especially amongst photographers, when I make a Steve Jobs portrait of him and they tell me it's the best picture they've ever had, or they tell me they haven't been in front of the camera since they were married 25 years ago, I feel like I am making a positive impact in somebody's life.
Absolutely.
And without the danger of seeking the fame of it, of being in the news.
Yeah.
I think we should use our superpowers to benefit lives and to the benefit of whatever it is.
Absolutely.
If your pictures benefit conservation for a landscape, that's great, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. With great power,
but make sure
with great power comes great responsibility, right? So
just make sure your heart's in the right direction.
That's right.
And you got to check yourself. You got to look back and say, like, this happens almost every time I go out to do street photography, and I approach people and I talk to them and I make a picture with them. And when I'm done, almost every time I get turned down, which I can count the number of times I've been turned down. Like I could tell you each instance because it happens so rarely. Yeah. But each time I have, it's because I was more interested in the photograph than the person, and in showing off, and that ruins the experience for both of us. Yeah. And I can look back and check myself on those things. And yeah.
I love it.
I'll shut up.
I love it. Yeah, it's a pleasure talking to you, man. We could probably talk for hours. I love it. I love it. Well, cool, man. So tell me a little bit about what's going on with you now. You're doing some stuff over at Photo Focus, and what's happening in the world of Levi Sim?
Sure. Well, so I write for Photo Focus, and I podcast at Photo Focus, and I'm trying to expand things for the Photo Focus podcast and webinars a bit, and make a richer experience there. And I teach a lot. I just moved to Boise, Idaho. I'm a hunter now.
You're a hunter.
I'm a hunter, and I was never a hunter growing up in any way, but I'm a full-on hunting fool now.
What are you hunting?
Oh, all kinds of stuff. Like this is my first year hunting, and I think I've killed 24 animals this year.
Jeez, wow.
Non-fish animals, birds and rabbits, and I killed a bear last week, which is not a small thing. Yeah,
a bear.
I killed a bear, a black bear.
Wow,
American blood. Yeah, and like something I didn't know growing up was that it's against the law not to take the meat home with you.
That makes sense.
When you kill an animal, like it's called poaching if you don't take the meat home with you. Okay. And so I'd like people to understand that.
Wow.
And let me tell you, that bear is the most delicious thing I have ever eaten in my life. What? Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Like there's a roast in the fridge right now that I cooked up yesterday. It's so good.
That's awesome.
It is so good.
Wow.
And
wow.
So that's like a big. It's been a big change in my life recently.
Well, that goes to show how multifaceted photographers are, right? I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
You
absolutely.
can go from shooting people to shooting bears.
Well, and it's helped me learn a lot about wildlife photography as well, which is something I've never been strong in. So I'm also working on that right now. But man, I'm just excited for the rest of this year. I'm going to Chicago this week to teach at the Out of Chicago conference.
Yeah.
I'm going to Montana next week to teach at a dude ranch up there where we do a workshop every year.
Very cool.
And then what else is coming up? There's got to be some photo walks I can do somewhere this summer. And then
there's always something new to do.
New York and trying to see if there's a way I can go to Photokina. It's a Photokina year, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Have you ever been?
I've never been. I might have to go this year. Yeah, Germany, right? Yeah.
Right.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'll split a hotel with you.
Hey, long as
and maybe 4 other guys we could work.
As long as you don't mind me not snoring, you would be good.
That would be a fresh take on a roommate at a photo conference for me.
Yeah, the snores have it. Yeah. Well, you get used to headphones, right? So.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So
well, cool, man. Well, thank you for doing this. I appreciate you doing this. This is awesome. It's good to have you on. Please don't be a stranger. I'd love to have you back on again. Maybe as a co-host for the show.
If I can ever help. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, let me help anytime.
Absolutely.
And if anyone out there, if I can help you, let me know. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Photo Focus. So
there you go. And I'll link to all that stuff in the description for the YouTube video, on Facebook, and on the blog. So yeah, you will be connected as if you needed it. Come on, you know. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much, Levi. I appreciate it. This is TWiP.